Stay hungry, stay foolish.
Our guests today are Silicon Valley veterans. One created the first Apple mouse, the other designed the award-winning Apple PowerBook and the original Star Wars action figures. 13 years ago, they founded the Stanford Life Design Lab, and they now teach thousands of students how to apply design thinking to get unstuck in life. The course, the most popular in Stanford, has led to a global franchise and a New York Times best-selling and worldwide best-selling book, Designing Your Life, published in 2016. Today, they are here to discuss their follow-up book, Designing Your Work Life, How to Thrive and Change and Find Happiness at Work. We welcome Bill Burnett and Dave Evans. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Unusual we have both co-authors on the show, but it's great to have you here. And good news for our audience, I have a copy of the book up for grabs. You can see it behind me on my right. It's up for grabs. Just sign up to the innovationshow.io newsletter for a chance to win that. Let's get straight into it because I know you guys are under time pressure. Let's start off with the context for this book because it was born out of both the lab work and then your previous book, the hit book in 2016.
The book actually began from the publisher. I mean, the publisher said, look, this isn't a book, it's a movement. We got to keep the mojo going. Hey, you guys come up with a bunch of ideas for where we could go from here. And so we sat down, Bill and I sat down with our agent and with our collaborative writer, with our team, and I said, by the way, I'm not going to necessarily work on the book. I'm just here to ideate because Bill likes to ideate with me. So I'm just an ideation consultant today. I may not be a co-author, so I was really reticent. And we have all these ideas. We I think shipped 8 titles off to the publisher, and they came back and they picked this one. So they picked Designing Your Work Life, and the idea was first and foremost that a lot of people think it's not necessarily true that Designing Your Life, our first book, is about really big change at the dramatic inflection moments of your life. It actually applies all the time, but most people read it at a big moment. And a whole lot of people don't want to massively change their lives. They want it to be a little bit better, small change right where they are. And if you ask people, what's the one place you'd like to make a little better if you could, work absolutely comes up number one every single time. And then so then they go, great. And Bill and I get together to figure out what that book is, because all we knew was the title. And we sit down and I say, Bill, this is a disaster. We have no idea what this book is. All I know is the title. We haven't taught a course on this for 12 years. We don't know. I have no idea. And then I'll let Bill explain how 20 minutes later, it was all done.
I mean, between us, we've got, whatever, 40 years of working. And both of us have always had jobs we really liked, or design jobs, that just by instinct that were great. And, about a half an hour later, we had a whiteboard full of stuff. We had the minimum actionable problems. We had some beginnings of Maker Mix. We had all sorts of things. Because the fact is we've been working a long time and we've been in the conversation with 20-somethings, 30-somethings, 50-somethings about work and what's working for them and what isn't. And then I went around and dug up at the Gallup poll statistic that 69% of U.S. workers are disengaged or actively disengaged at work. And we were like, well, that doesn't,
international, yeah.
Yeah, I said, that doesn't make sense. Why are people so bummed out? And then we started doing what designers do. We did the empathy step. We started talking to people. And we just found out that people are stuck in, the job isn't very meaningful. The job isn't, I don't see how this matches my purpose in life. Now you get the pandemic and all the stresses that are caused by working from home or not being in an office with your colleagues. And then there's, since we wrote the 2016 book, certainly the phenomenon of the gig worker, the worker that's working, with a tech startup like Uber or Lyft or Postmates or Grubhub or whatever the delivery apps are in where you guys are. And those folks are all going, well, is this it? Is this going to be my career? So we just found there was a lot of dysfunction out there, like we did with the first book. And it wasn't that, the book kind of, all the chapters created themselves and off we went.
75,000 hours. That's how long most of us spend in workplace. But you made some personas, and I thought we'd start off with those personas because they will resonate with some of our listeners. You had, like, for example, Bonnie, Marie, and Lewis. Maybe you'd take us through some of those guys.
So we've got, the 52-year-old guy that's stuck in the job and he's got to pay the bills, and then the company gets acquired by some other corporate holding outfit and the culture changes and he hates it, but he can't afford to quit. Oh God, now what's he gonna do? So that's a classic version of stuck. Bill, you pick one or two more.
The Bonnie version is actually a thinly disguised student of ours. She's, she's 5 years out of college. She's had 5 jobs. This generation. I love my millennials. I love the Gen Zs. They're all great, and they're willing to work really hard. You see them in startups; they'll work 100 hours a week.
And by the way, all 5 of those jobs worked. That was the problem.
Yeah, all the jobs are great. She loved them all. She did a great job at all of them. But there's a sort of a generational hook on novelty. Like, I already did this job once, why would I want to do it again? What happens at a job is, hey, you ran that project really, really well. You know what you get as a reward? Do another one. And then another one.
And the problem was that they were all fine. Some of them were even pretty good, but nothing was amazing. And I want it to be amazing. Are you telling me there's no amazing available in the world? Oh no, my life is over. So she's got that problem.
Yeah, and the Lewis is the classic. Get on the train, commute into the city, commute to London. Do the 9-to-5 job. Back in the 50s, there was a book in the U.S. called "The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit," and it was about this kind. There's nothing wrong with this life, but this is the classically disengaged worker. Does the job, he works at the accounting firm, works at the big trading company, whatever it is, and he's a cog in the machine, and he turns his wheel. But he gets back on, he looks on the train looking at his reflection in the window. He's saying to himself, is this it? Is this what I went to college for? Is this it? I'm just going to do this every day till I die? Or till they retire me? Or till the company gets bought, or till there's a layoff or a redundancy. All of those people were people we were trying to talk to in the book, because they're all stuck in different ways. One's looking for novelty and wants it always to be exciting and purposeful. One's just stuck because it's boring. One's stuck because he signed up for one job and then they changed it, right? And all of these situations are situations where you can use design thinking to kind of reboot the job or reboot your search for the right job. And also, it's a way of figuring out, well, what does make me happy? What does, trigger some sense of meaning and purpose in my life? Or maybe just to reframe the job and say, hey, this job's fine. I go to work every day. I do a good job. But when I come home, now I'm coaching, the soccer team. Now I'm working, at my church or my community organization and doing things that really are meaningful. So it's this over and over in the first book, the second book, and everybody we've ever talked to. Everybody's looking for a life that's got some meaning and purpose in it, where there's more happiness, in general about stuff. And since we spend 40 or 50 hours a week at work, like I said, 75 to 120,000 hours of my life will be at this place called work. We just wanted to help people optimize that experience a little bit.
And by the way, it's not just people who are struggling or failing or unhappy who are stuck. One of the characters in the book that is unnamed, but I think it's not confidential to share, is the global CEO of Penguin Random House. That leads all 24 imprints worldwide, because he was working with us. He was talking to our agent one day and he goes, well, hey, where's my chapter? And so the chapter on overwhelm is specifically for Marcus Dole, who is the global CEO of PR. He goes, this is my problem. Is that in the book? It's got to be in the book. You're a highly successful, very happy global CEO of a massive multi-billion-dollar publishing entity, and you need a chapter in the book too, because everybody gets that.
Absolutely. And I love what you said. I'll come back to something Bill said there, because you said the grey flannel suit, we're not cogs in the machine. You say, and I love this, we are levers in our own lives. And you say the beautiful thing about designers, and it's in your blood from a long time ago, is that you don't think your way forward, you build it forward. And to do that, we need 6 distinct mindsets. I'd love if you share this.
We talked about the mindsets in the beginning. In the first book, we added a mindset here. It's like, first it's get curious, because curiosity is the fuel that, moves you into the future. gee, I wonder what would happen next, you know, if you have that curiosity. Then radical collaboration, because, you know, you got to be out in the world working with people. Reframing the problem is the really big one. Reframes are, you know, like the power tool. Like if you're working on the wrong problem, you're not going to get a good result. Mindful of process, because, you know, you want to make sure you're flaring when you need to flare and focusing when you need to focus. And then a bias to action, which is, you know, if you can't plan the future, so let's just go try stuff. And then our new mindset was storytelling, because we, you know, one, storytelling is a big deal in design nowadays. David Kelly, who's our senior professor at Stanford and the guy who started IDEO and the D School, he'll say, you know, nowadays it's not enough for the designer to just come and say, hey, look, I invented the mouse. You got to be able to tell the story of, like, this is the thing that's going to allow you to use computers in a brand new way, and the future is going to be so great. So we got to have storytelling, and storytelling also completes the loop, you know, on the get curious, talk to people, try stuff, storytelling, because storytelling is where we invite the world, you know, to join us on our journey.
Dave, let's jump into it with something that you tee up with a question, and you say it's something anybody who has kids knows this very well, or anybody who's actually just been in a car with some kids, and it's, are we there yet?
Yes. And the answer is no, we are not there yet. When Bill and I sat down, you know, what we talked about was, you know, people are unhappy, you know, and there yet. I mean, you know, am I making enough money yet? Am I promoted yet? Am I realizing my dreams yet? Have I impacted the world enough yet? You know, have I fulfilled the utilization and stewardship of my gifts well enough yet? I mean, and the answer is always no. And so it's not good enough. And this is what led us to the, you know, to the reframe of course we're not there yet, because we're on a journey, and who wants it to be over? Now, can I make some design modifications to make it good enough for now? Good enough, comma, ... for now. And so we're not saying saddle. We're not saying, hey, gray flannel suit guy, just get a blue suit and add it to the thing, and that's all you get. You know, you did 2 suits. No, we're not saying that. And we're not saying, by the way, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. We don't use that phrase. In fact, I think that phrase embodies an idea that really doesn't work, which is, let's take something you really don't like at all. It tastes horrible, and let's just find a way to like it. Let's just mess with it and take a bad thing and make it a good thing. You know, let's just, you know, well, you know, I mean, not that those ideas have no value, but we're not saying just get good at settling, sprinkle sugar over a bunch of crap and enjoy it. No, we're saying you can design a new reality, and even a small incremental change can have a highly leveraged outcome. So can we make it good enough for now, for a period of time, live into that, get the full benefit from it, and then we'll do it again, we'll do it again, we'll do it again. You know, so we're on the way.
When we had the phrase, you know, are we there yet? We had not contemplated the COVID pandemic.
Yeah.
And everybody's asking the question, are we there yet? Are we done?
Is there a there?
And we
it's
did
like a Disneyland queue.
A little YouTube channel on, you know, design in the COVID times. And it's like, you know, everybody's sitting in the waiting room going, is this going to be over yet? Is this going to be over? Are we there? Are we there? Are we there? And that's driving people crazy. And you got to reframe that, because that's just, you know, everything in our bag of tricks, if you will, is all about giving you some control. When you can say, hey, this is good enough. I can make this good enough for now. And I got some ideas about how to make it better in the future. But I'm in control of how I imagine this. I'm in control of my mindset. And I can decide how to move forward. Design is a series of decisions. Good ones and bad ones, but we're typically trying to make good ones. We're trying to make the next design better than the last design. And so every time we design something, you know, I mean, we talked about, I was at Apple when we did the first laptop, you know, and we thought that was an amazing thing. It had an 8-inch screen that was black and white. It had less than a half a megabyte of memory. It had a little tiny processor that maybe ran at 1 gigahertz. I mean, it's a laughable machine today. But your designs are about the time they're in, right? And at the time, that was the best possible design. And now we've got things that are amazing. I mean, I look at my iPad Pro, which is this thick. It's a piece of glass with the internet, you know, like it's a portal into a world. So every time we make a design, we do the best we can. And we know it's just good enough for now. But as long as you're making choices, you're not a victim. You're not being, you're not being assaulted by the circumstances. You're taking some control. Now, we can't control everything. We talk about gravity problems, things you can't do. There's stuff you can't change. You know, we're about to have an election tomorrow in our country, and a whole bunch of stuff is going to happen, but there's a whole bunch of stuff isn't going to happen. And there's still going to be people on both sides who are really, you know, angry, and you can't change that. But you can do your part to make something in your life and your family's life and the people around you a little bit better.
So let's latch on to the word change, because you study behavior change a lot in the Stanford Design Life Lab, and you study how difficult it can be. So you suggest that we set the bar just low enough, and you've done this in all your designs, just to nudge little behavior just a little bit over the line every single time. I'd love to share that, because let's get into the tool set and the toolbox.
The second book includes a bunch of stuff that's now in the book that we found ourselves saying over and over and over again when talking about the first book. So the four-step simplified process of get curious, talk to people, try stuff, tell your story. Okay, that came out of conversations, and now it got so sticky it's become the architectural backdrop. And the thing about set the bar low, so, you know, and Bill then one day was just saying, well, yeah, we should use the set the bar low method. I go, great, let's name it. We're done. And so we just codified this phrase, set the bar low method. Now, design thinking, I've always said the cardiopulmonary system of design thinking, or human-centered design, as we called it back in 1963, is prototype iteration. And prototypes are small, easy to implement, you know, experiments, i.e. their bar is intrinsically low. They're cheap and they're fast. The only goal they have is to learn something. And so you want them to iterate quickly. So you iterate rapidly rather than a whole bunch of stuff in this category is trying to be inspiration. You can be your amazing self. You should be your gold. Aidan, are you really being your A self today? Here's the bar, jump over your own head. Let's go. You can do it, buddy. Okay, I'll argue inspirational to be your superhuman self. Hey, what's your superpower? Is a cool phrase in California these days. I'm not sure if it is in Dublin, but, you know, and I go, well, I'm sorry, I don't have a superpower. You see, I'm not superhuman. I'm a human. I'm just trying to be more human. And so we're trying to give people doable things. And I would say a lot of inspiration is mostly soul crushing, because you're asking people to do stuff they can't possibly sustain. It sounds great. It gets you all jazzed up, and then you feel terrible because you fail. So design has known small increments work because you can't overtest too quickly. Now, behavior modification science has caught up to that. I mean, we were doing that a long time ago, and it just happened to be wonderfully coincident with work, particularly our buddy B.J. Fogg, who is a true behaviorist at Stanford and collaborates with us, just came out, you know, shares our agent. We got him in touch with those people. You know, Tiny Habits is his new book. You know, the small changes.
He's coming on soon, Dave. Actually, he's on the show soon.
Yeah, he's a great guy. And he'll actually tell you the long and very thoroughly researched answer as to why behavior modification is done in small increments. We're practitioners. We want to do stuff. We're not interested in being right. We're interested in getting stuff done. So if we can help people make progress, great, let's go.
One of the other tools that you introduce is the Good Life Journal and the Good Life Journal exercises, which you freely make available from your website as well. I'd love to share these.
There's the Good Time Journal in the first book, which is looking at all day long, what do you do that gives you energy and at what level of your engagement, kind of learn what works for you. And then we refined it to the Good Work Journal, which actually is a way to extract value from what you're doing. It helps you design your way forward. It can be an empathy step to look for what might work for me, but it's also a feedback loop as a practice. And Bill will describe it. It asks 3 questions.
Yeah, it asks 3 questions. What did you learn today? What did you initiate today? And who did you help? And this comes from the research from guys like James Dici and others who were doing.
What was the third one, Bill? You kind of went through that. The third one is?
Learning, initiating, and helping.
Who do I help?
Who did you help? So it comes from a theory about intrinsic motivations. Like if I'm learning stuff, if I'm learning and mastering new things, I do that just for the joy of doing it. Helping other people, you know, is the number one indicator of happiness when you believe you're doing something for other people, not yourself. And then, you know, initiating things is about taking action. It's about this biased action. So we said, look, every day you do some stuff. And look for small stuff. Hey, I helped Gladys in accounting, format her spreadsheet. Hey, I cleaned up the break room. This would be if we were in offices. I cleaned up the break room because the coffee had overflowed and it was messy. Just what are the small things you do every day? And then almost all of our exercises are first, notice what's going on. Pay attention to what's going on. Half the time, that guy on the train who's just bored out of his mind is bored because he's lost his curiosity. He stopped paying attention. There's a beautiful moment in every day. There's something in every day that you can either be grateful for or you can notice. And the learning, helping, and initiating rubric just pulls those things to the surface in a way that at the end of the week you go, hey, that was a pretty good week.
Yeah.
Aidan, you want to see if I've got an example I can pop up if you want to take a quick
Please do. Yeah, please do, Dave.
So we've got a little example right here. Let's see if this thing will be kind and actually show the right screen.
We'll describe it for our listeners as well.
Are you seeing this now?
Yeah.
Yeah, we are.
Okay, so it's just like you put the days of the week down, on the left side, and then across the top 3 columns. What did I learn? What did I initiate? Who did I help? And the key thing we want to point out here is, again, set the bar low. What did I learn about quantum physics? No, what did I learn about how to properly open a beer bottle? So on Monday, I learned how to make a pivot table in a spreadsheet, and I know that, hey, I could use that another time, And then on Tuesday, I learned that Gladys in accounting just became a grandmother. Now, I've still learned that. I'm not sure it's going to apply to my career, but then on what did I initiate? By Wednesday, I organized a congratulations card for Gladys in accounting. Then later on, on Thursday, I learned how to color code cells in a spreadsheet for positive, negative values. So I'm getting good at making dashboards. So those are just a little, and who did I help? I helped John put paper on the copier because John's no good at handling the copier.
You're really setting the bar low there. The bar is really low, Dave.
And on Friday, I helped Celia in accounting use my new color code pivot table. So what you do is you get very egalitarian about noticing what did I initiate, what did I learn, who did I help, and then you've got this record that allows you to go, wow, a lot happened this week. We refer to this approach as name it and claim it. You can't get the value out of something unless you notice it. Our favorite question is, what do you notice? And if you actually crawl under the hood, a bunch of our tools are ways to help you notice what's going on.
And one of the things you talk about then is actually, and we're all terrible at it, and the more active you are and the more productive you are, the worse you are usually at it, is actually giving yourself a pat on the back and going, good job this week. And you talk also about the 7th day exercise.
Almost every wisdom tradition has ways of going about helping us to be active reflectors. And life is built into rhythms. There's the rhythm of the day, the rhythm of the week, the rhythm of a season. We literally just went off daylight savings time this weekend here in California. And my wife's single most hated Saturday of the entire year because it gets dark. So these seasons occur, and you want to tap into those rhythms. And so the 7th day reflection is a variation on one of those. And it just says you look back at your week, and you take into stock, what do you notice? What some of the highs and the lows, in particular, if you're doing the good work journal, you've got a record you can review. If you're not doing that, just sit down for 5 minutes and say, what happened in my week that I appreciate? What happened that I want to take notice of? And in particular, let me look at moments for which I'm grateful or moments where it really highlights. And then the recommendation is to re-enter that moment. And you get 2 outcomes. You get one for sure, which is savoring. Right, so so we actually did this really special party on Saturday. We did Dia de los Muertos, which is the Day of the Dead, a Mexican variation on Halloween, actually incredibly different than Halloween, for all our grandkids. We have 9 grandkids. I'm really old, and so we had this moment where my wife was explaining to these kids what Dia de los Muertos really is, and there was and one of the kids asked a question. It was a really sweet question. They go, oh, that was really sweet. And boom, it just goes by, and somebody else grabs somebody else's candy and pulls their hair, and off you go. But if you go back and re-enter that moment and just hold that time, when Luke asked that question, you can savor it and get the full value of it all over again as long as you want. And if you do that on a couple of things, it may not be a party, it may be something in the staff meeting, you can, over time, when you jot these down in the journal, you can look back and go, hey, is there an invitation here for me to have an insight? Oh, I'm having an insight that, boy, a lot of my highlights were, in one-on-one conversations with people. You know, and my job is largely large groups, and I wonder, gee, I better make sure I don't lose track of that one-on-one conversation. You know, so you get insight. Now, there's no guarantee the reflection will give you an insight. You can't demand that of life, but you know, you have to pay attention to get them.
Bill, you're an artist, so this is going to be, you have so much of an opportunity, I suppose, to have those insights when you're in flow while you're painting.
Oh, exactly. I mean, and you know, and this idea of, you know, reimagining your experiences, savoring them, you know, and particularly flow experiences during the week. Look, you know, we're pretty, you know, hardwired, you know, humans. I mean, our brain can only pay attention to one thing at a time. This multitasking actually isn't true. And what we pay attention to is kind of how our mood, you know, gets set, how we feel about the day. So when we're asking people to pay attention to some things that were valuable, like, you know, helping somebody or having learning something, when you get in the habit of noticing the positive things that are going on in your life, you end up with a more positive affect. You have a more positive point of view. It's not that, you know, and bad stuff happens, and you have to pay attention to that as well, and you have to kind of notice that and reflect on that. But and I'm not sure you savor bad things, but processing them is very important. So mostly the week is full of all sorts of little victories and little moments of insight or little moments of something. And if you just get in the habit of paying attention to that, instead of paying attention to the jerk in accounting who didn't get your, you know, expense report done on time, you'll find yourself less frustrated. You'll find yourself, you know, and it builds on itself. You find other ways to tell other stories, and then other people tell you their stories, and pretty soon, you know, that's the community that you're looking for. So it all works. I think that you know, after the savoring is like going out and telling people, hey, the bonus step is telling that story and seeing what other people, what did you do this week? You know, this was really cool.
So I was going to talk about meaning and coherence. I'm going to skip over that because we've kind of touched on that. But one of the huge things related to storytelling is reframing, because reframing the story to tell a better story is essential in the toolkit.
We call it the power tool. Reframing is it's typically, you got a problem and you're stuck on it and you can't come up with any solutions. A lot of times, you know, it's a poorly framed problem. But even if it's a well-framed problem and it's not a gravity or an anchor problem, you don't have any solutions. So the typical reframe is to move up a step. I'll give you the classic, you know, the classic entrepreneurial story is Howard Schultz and the invention of Starbucks. You know, did he reinvent coffee? No, coffee's still coffee. Did he invent the latte? No, he didn't invent the latte. You know, if the task was, hey, come up with a new kind of coffee, there's not that much you can do. The story was Schultz was in Italy, and he was in a little cafe in a small town in Italy, and he walked into the coffee shop, and the espresso machine is hissing and the steam is coming up, and all the old guys are standing at the counter because they stand to have their morning espresso, and they're chatting and they're talking about their days and what they're going to do, and they're laughing and they're telling jokes and they're, you know, whatever they're doing. And there was art on the wall, and he walked into that thing and he smelled the smells and he heard the sounds and he saw the community. He said, we don't have anything like this in America. This isn't about coffee. This is about the experience of coming together in the morning with a little jolt of caffeine, but it's bigger than that. He came back, recreated it in some form in the US, and that was the invention of Starbucks. So it's not about the problem, it's moving up a level. You know, it's not the coffee, it's the coffee experience. It's not just the experience, it's the experience of community. Once I'm redesigning community, if that's my reframe, I got a million ideas. If my problem is to redesign coffee, I don't know, tall cup, short cup, you know, with milk, without milk. I mean, you know, you got to get to a level of the problem where there's enough room to have new ideas, and that's the power of reframing.
It's interesting, you know, Aidan, we get called on our own. You do this kind of work, and you have totally signed up to be a hypocrite. I mean, you know, my wife constantly goes, you know, there's this book you really should read, and it's a fair critique. But, you know, one of the things Bill and I both have been caught at, they kind of go, hey, you guys recommend reframing all the time. You do it all the time. You never explain how to do it. How do you do it? And for both of us, frankly, we've been at this so long, we just do. I mean, what I literally do when I reframe is my brain looks like one of those multi-screen theaters. There's about 17 movies playing at one time, all the time, and people are talking to me, and I just quickly scan the screens to see if one of them is playing something more interesting about the story they're saying. I go, hey, what if we looked at it this way? And I read from the screen in my head, and they go, yeah, that'd be really cool. So but you can't teach people to do that. I mean, that's aberrant behavior. But what we have found is Bill talked about, one thing is you level up so you get more view, right? You can see more possibilities. And the other is you got to get out from under. So there's people who need to see higher, and there are people who need to stop seeing lower. And that's the example in the book. The problem is my stupid boss is just a jerk. I never get any feedback around here. People
Bernie, the stupid boss.
Embed in their problem statement a dysfunctional conviction that's going to keep them grounded to it. I will never because, and so, okay, the old adage, if you want to argue for your limitations, you're probably going to get to keep them. So what we do is help people get loose of the stuff in their problem framings that are bolting them to the ground. So if you have to be objective, you have to be, fairly unimpassioned. Design thinking actually isn't nice. It's pretty perky people who do it, but the truth is it's brutally objective because reality, the way things actually are, like, yes, that virus will kill you. So let's take some attention to it. We have to be brutally committed to reality and just realize, oh, if I want something new to happen, this is why acceptance is so important, then I have to start where things are. Because design, being empirical, being hands-on, being behavioral, not just imaginary, requires reality to work. You can't design in the land of should. You can't design in the land of just the way I wish it were. So we're realists.
Yeah, like I said, we do this a lot intuitively. Dave, Dave actually did most of the chapter here. Describe the minimum actionable problem, Dave, because this is instead of going up a level of abstraction, this is a going into the problem and taking all the parts out that don't matter.
Yeah, so if you take the example of, so some guy says, hey, man, I'm never getting feedback around, and my boss is just a jerk. You go, okay, well, first of all, you got a couple of things in there. Apparently, you're interested in feedback. It implies that you want to get that feedback from your boss, and he never gives it to you, so you've decided that he's a jerk. So which problem did you want to solve? Do you want to solve where you're getting your feedback? Do you want to solve what kind of feedback you're getting? Do you want to solve the fact that your boss is a jerk? Do you want to get him a personality transplant or get him fired? Okay, well, probably I would say the minimum actionable problem is not get your boss fired. There's a chapter on politics in the book, but it's not about that. And so, okay, well, what you really want is feedback, right? Okay, so now I notice you've decided feedback you have to ask the honest question, do you think your boss's personality is one where feedback is going to come from there? No. Okay, so if the reframe is, I notice my boss is bad at feedback, I wonder where else I could get some. That's a very different problem. And now say, okay, now my first task is simply look around in my current job description, in my current communication and workflow patterns, where are places where I can receive both intrinsic and explicit feedback, identify the ones that seem to be the most credible to you and work the best, and see whether or not is there a way. Now the task become, can I design a way to get a little, my boss, Bill, I'm the extrovert, he's the introvert, he doesn't give feedback very much, he doesn't talk that much, I poke him and nothing much happens. But I could talk to Sherry Shepard down the hall, and she's bouncy. That's not true, by the way.
I'm trying to look down the hall there.
No, he's an introvert, but he gives great feedback. He's learned how to do that. But there are ways to get there. So the minimum actionable problem is like, well, what is it you really want to make it good enough for now?
And Dave, I'm going to stay with you because we talked about view there, and you encourage us to write a work view and then a life view, and you share your story here, and it'll become clear why I'm asking you this, because you did this very profoundly in your own life when you were a little bit overwhelmed with the work view.
Most of us are walking out our woundedness, right? We're all walking wounded. And for many of us, our vocation ends up some way reflecting, if we found some healing along the way, we want to share that with the world, particularly if the problem we struggled with is endemic to the human experience. And, in my late teens, early 20s, when I was in college, they're like, what do I do with this life thing? It was really, really difficult. and struggling with that for 30 odd years, and it was what turned into what became finally Designing Your Life. So for me, there was a time, particularly at one point when I was the co-founder of Electronic Arts, and life wasn't working at all. I mean, it sounds great on paper, but I'm working 80 hours a week in a company that was going to be this creativity thing and just turned into a pure game company, which is fine, except I don't like them at all. I'm in charge of product development in a game company, and I don't like games at all. That's a problem. And I care deeply about my kids because my father killed himself when I was a young man, when I was 9 years old, and I didn't have a father. I wanted to be a father. I'm a terrible father because I'm just working all the time, and I'm unhappy when I get home because I don't like the work. And just, holy shit, this is not working. Pardon my French. And so, yeah, that's when I'm living incoherently. Who I am, what I'm doing, and what I believe in are not lined up at all. And so later on, we came up with these exercises. Well, what do you think work is really about? What's your work view? Not what job description do you want, but what does work mean to you? What's it about? What's about the money, about the contribution, about the skill? A lot of things in there. And then is that, coincident with your values around what you think are the most important questions in life? What are the ultimate questions for you? Like, why are we here? And those things are your pointer to call that the compass exercise, because the answers to those questions, you can then assess your current life and go, well, where are the gaps? And can I redesign in place to be more coherent? And ultimately, if I can't, then maybe I need to start looking at even relocating.
You mentioned there politics, and I really want to share a little bit on that because it's so important to our listenership, who a lot of people work in innovation and change within organizations. A lot of people are entrepreneurs and think, I don't have to put up with that politics things. I'll come back to that. But I really wanted to share the Maker Mixing Board exercise. It's fantastic. And Dave, I think you can show it on screen for those people who are watching us.
Bill narrated.
Pop it up on screen. So when we, first book we were talking about was work-life balance. Oh, I can't get my work-life balance right. And we said, look, whenever it's a dichotomy like that, you're screwed because you get more of one, you get less of the other. So we reframed this idea of money versus meaning. Well, I want to have a meaningful job, but the meaningful jobs don't pay very much. They're in nonprofits and schools and things like that, but the jobs that pay a lot are horrible and you have to do mean things to people. And we said, no, that's not how it works. So we blew it into three things. And the three things came from our conversations with people, and particularly when people made their Odyssey plans, which is an assignment from the first book, they came up with lots of things about impact and expression and money and all the different ways that it could work. So we said, look, you're like mixing a song. This is a mixer board. You have sliders on this board. And you set your output levels for what your current intentions. How much money do I need to make, or how much money am I making, and is that right where I want it to be? How much impact am I making? So in the money in the commercial economy, we get paid money. The business economy, it's all about money. But let's say I work for a nonprofit and we're putting kids in after-school sports programs to keep them out of gangs. I'm not measuring my return on investment on that company. It's a nonprofit. I'm measuring my impact. How many kids are we impacting? How many people are we getting out of homeless shelters and into housing? So impact is the measure there. And then almost everybody wants something in their life to be creative. And when we talk to the creative people, the writers and the poets and the artists and folks, they said, yeah, it's all about expression. If I get to do my play or sing my song or paint my painting, then I'm happy. I'm not looking to be paid off in that economy and money. I'm looking to be paid in expression dollars, if you will, to mix metaphors. So you figure out where you are. I'm okay on money. I'm not having very much impact, not having any expression at all. Then you say, okay, what's a small change? Again, a small change, a tiny change we could make, a little prototype we could run that might move one of those things. I'd like to move my impact up a little. I'd like to have more impact in the world. And I want to work with kids. So I'm going to volunteer at my school, and I'm just going to go in one day a week, and I'm going to help kids learn to read. Boom, impact went up. My mix feels like a better song for me right now. We talked beforehand, Aidan, about I'm moving towards being more of a full-time artist from a part-time artist. So I'm trying to take that expression knob and put it way up high. I don't, like if I turn out to be Picasso, which is unlikely, then I will have invented a new visual language and I will have impacted the world of art. Probably not going to happen, but I'm going to have a good time painting. I'm going to have lots of expression. The money will be fine. The impact will be, right now at Stanford, I'm working mostly for impact. I'm trying to train the next generation of designers. So my impact dial is way high.
Well, at Stanford, I'm working entirely for impact because I gave all my income back to Kathy so she could budget for other people. The, and by the way,
Yeah, so it's, you know, it's about what fits now and where are you going and how you're going to get there with some small prototypes that you can run literally in a week to see if you like the impact or like the expression or like the increase in money. You want more money? Do a gig, do a weekend gig.
at the top, it says set your current, it says output level. One of the misperceptions here, you know, for a lot of people is more is better. Like, oh, a really good maker mix would be all 3 sliders maxed out. No, that'd be horrible. I mean, if you're on a soundboard and you're mixing a really great song, you know, an award-winning song, you don't take all the sliders and shove them to the top. A max bass, max treble, max mid-range, max reverb. It's just noise. And what we're dealing with here is not, you know, more is better. And the max is whatever it happens to be for you. So what's your, if you imagine you are being as creative as you possibly could be, you're fully exercising your creativity muscles, that's what max means. You know, if the same thing were true about your impact in terms of your contacting other lives or however you think about it. Just again, how you think about it. And so what you're playing around with is what portion of your output are you sending out through that channel? I've got, you know, if I think of myself as like I got a bunch of I/O plugs on the front of my chest, and you know, one of them is an output channel for money and an output channel for impact and an output channel for expression. Am I turning them up or down? Because I can't max them all out. I'll pass out in about 10 minutes.
Don't be giving people ideas, man. I know you're in Silicon Valley. You'll be hooked up to a machine in no time.
That's kind of scary. But the whole idea is just what's working for you, which is why, by the way, if one goes up, the others don't have to go down. It is not a zero-sum game.
Let's move on to power and politics, because I'd love to. There's an impact map as well, which is fantastic. Highly recommend going through the book, and loads of exercise were glossed over. I sent you my notes, and you said I didn't budget for 4 hours here for this interview, so I have to make some calls here. I thought the power and politics chapter was really, really important because, for lots of reasons, those people who work in innovation and entrepreneurship within big, large organizations often have nothing to trade. They have no power to trade. They've no people. They've no status. Sometimes when they join, they don't even have any contribution yet. So how do they manage that ecosystem? That's one thing. And then the other one is, don't think just because you're a small business owner or somebody working alone as a gig in the gig economy that power and politics is not important. It's essentially important. And that was a real penny drop for me, because I hate the idea of politics within an organization. It's really hard, but it's so important to understand it. I'd love if you'd share some on this.
In organizational life, there are lots of forms of power. You can go get a PhD on power forms in organizational development and organizational theory. You know, 10, 12, 15 different kinds of power. But again and again and again, the two big dogs that rule the roost almost 90% of the time in 90% of the situations are authority and influence. And authority is the direct power to make decisions and what have you, and influence is on that. And the key thing to understand is influence always acts on authority. So if you're trying to make a change in the world, trying to do something, you're going to make a change. Well, before every change that occurs that's visible, somebody made a decision, right? And if you made a decision, then you have to have the authority to make that decision. Well, says who? Well, you know, I mean, says who we're going to talk about. I mean, you're the authoritative guy on picking the questions for this interview, right? Now, before we got started, I said, well, hey, I think politics might be better. Why don't you talk about it? I can try to influence you, but it only works if the guy that has the power, the woman who has the power, actually agrees with you. So wielding of influence is the definition of organizational politics. The reason most people, just yourself included probably, is we don't like politics is most people's first exposure to politics is ugly, bad politics. People behaving badly, people trying to influence for personal gain, not for organizational health. And so we learn the yucky stuff and we get a contact reaction against it. The truth is 95% of political activity, small p, the wielding of influence is done healthily on behalf of let's try to do the right thing, right? So for instance, I've started to become the outside guy at the STANFORD Life Design Lab. Bill's very much the inside guy, still has a full-time Stanford job leading the design program. So I'm not running the lab anymore. Kathy Davies is running the lab and Bill's directing her and that team. Now, I'm still pretty influential because like I helped write the book and I thought the whole thing up, 20 years ago. But nonetheless, I've got to convince Kathy and Bill hey, should we be adding a character module to the course? And if so, how do we go about that? Then I have to go to those people and wield my influence on behalf of doing better work for more students to help them live lives of joy and authenticity. That's not a nasty thing. So if you understand that, then pretty much you get this 2x2 matrix, which is people who have influence and people who don't, and people who have authority and people who don't. So you've got influential authoritarians, people who have power, formal power, and people listen to. You've got influential non-authoritarians. That's me at Stanford right now. I have no authority at all, none, but I'm pretty influential in this one little area. Then you've got non-influential non-authoritarians, which is most people, by the way. They're not bad. They're just not in positions of either influence or authority. And then you have non-influential authoritarians, kind of the executive vice president of looking out the window. People get kicked upstairs. And so when you think of it just in those terms, who has influence, who has authority, who has both, who has neither, you can quickly sort any population of people in a workplace and realize how does it work. And the way it works, by the way, is you gain influence by adding value, doing something people think is worthwhile, and then having the powerful people recognize that. So let's say after this conversation, Aidan goes, boy, those guys ask really, really good questions. I like their, I should put them on the interview team. In fact, I should run all my questions by Bill from now on. I think I want to do that. You just decided to make Bill influential in your podcast.
Gotcha.
By virtue of your recognizing the insight, let's say the third time he goes, well, Aidan, that's a really good question. I think what you're really getting at is, then he reframes your question to a much better question. He says, oh, I wish I'd asked it that way. He does that 3 times and kind of go, I'm going to have him prove all my questions.
Brilliant.
That's where influence comes from. He recognized good work. So that the essential engine of politics is fundamentally healthy once you level up and get out of the muck.
And you have an exercise, Bill, that goes with this that you run in your workshops, which is the power sort exercise, which is really useful.
And sometimes when we run it, people go, that's what happened in my startup. I had no idea. Everybody seemed to be churning and churning and churning. And we kept having different objectives every week and we didn't understand it. And then they look at it and they go, oh, okay, what was happening is there was the founders. Then the founding team got displaced because the VCs didn't think there was enough progress. So they brought in the new CEO, and the new CEO had authority, but nobody knew the new CEO. So there was no one influencing him. He was just acting as an authoritarian. And in the meantime, the 2 founders who got pushed to the side, who had lots of influence, because everybody joined to be with those 2, we're trying to figure out how to resolve the influence and authority struggle in my startup, or something even more benign. But to Dave's point, when a company's disorganized, or when it doesn't have this, you got 3 CEOs in 3 years, or it doesn't really, something's happened in the marketplace and suddenly its winning strategy is a losing strategy and it doesn't know what to do. By the way, when I left Apple, it was when Apple stock was at 14. And when Michael Dell said the kindest thing Steve Jobs could do would be to sell the company and give the stockholders their money back. No, Apple didn't have a strategy. Apple had 4 CEOs in 6 years. And what Steve did when he came back is he rationalized the strategy around what was actually happening in the marketplace. He came up with just 3 really good ideas: an iPod, an iPhone, and an iPad. But that was enough to organize everybody. And then all the politics became normal and everybody was trying to work for the good of the company. Previous to that, if there's no strategy and I'm the senior vice president of something, then what I want to do is have a bigger empire. So I'm going to argue to reorganize the company around me, or I'm going to argue, to give me all the money for the projects because I'm the best guy. But it had nothing to do with what was good for the company. So you can experience bad politics, particularly in times of change, and times when people don't know what's going on, or times when the new owner comes in and no one has influence because the new owner has its own his own side. By the way, what Steve did when he came in is he fired all the senior managers and brought in a team that he already knew, primarily because they were people who gave him the best advice. They were very influential with him, and he knew he would need that in order to operate the company, because he was arriving,
That's a quick sidebar, by the way. I did management consulting for 25 years. Classic example, in comes into executive, cleans house immediately. People classically believe that's because, like, it's the good guys and the bad guys. Not because the good, you're bad, you're out of here. You're all crap. No, that is not why they're doing that. If you're brought in from the outside to lead something that was in trouble, you're supposed to fix it, and you're supposed to move quickly. You've got 100 days before they decide, nope, not you.
Wow.
Which means I have no time. I have to find trustworthy influencers. Aidan, you may be terrific. I haven't got time to figure that out. I know Bill. I'm putting Bill in your chair. Sorry, buddy. Simply because I totally know Bill can deliver, and I need him to deliver like by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. So the reason people do that is speed. It's not vendettas. It's just, again, back to reality. It just is what it is. How can we design our way forward?
I know you're under pressure to go, speaking of speed, and I had loads more questions, as you know, to ask you. I didn't get through even a tenth of them. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to the authors of Designing Your Work Life, How to Thrive and Change and Find Happiness at Work, Bill Burnett and Dave Evans. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much. Where can people find out more if they want to look at the franchise, all that kind of stuff?
Well, the home website is still designingyour.life. So it's the first book title with a dot. There's also designingyourwork.life. And those will both take you wherever you need to go. And there's lots of stuff on there. And there's, video training courses at Creative Lab. But
all the worksheets are there for free if you need them. Yeah.
We took this little 4-step refrain. And if I want to leave people with anything, memorize the following 10 words. Get curious, talk to people, try stuff, tell your story. Get curious, talk to people, try stuff, tell your story, which is get energized about something, 2 steps of prototyping, and then go tell the story and be an interesting person.
Been an absolute pleasure talking to you guys. Thanks so much for your time and for your brilliant books. Thank you.
Thanks, Aidan. Good job.